The room was dimly lit, but the tension was glaring. Reporters packed into the National Unity Forum in D.C., cameras already rolling before the opening remarks. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, in a tailored suit and flanked by aides, stood center stage with a composed, professional smile. The podium bore the seal of the event, Voices of Healing. But to actor Jonathan Roumie, seated silently in the front row, it might as well have said, Voices we approve of. Jonathan wasn't on the guest list. He had RSVP'd 3 times and been denied each time with the same polite reply. This forum is reserved for leadership figures focused on bipartisan reconciliation. Translation, no conservatives allowed, but that didn't stop him. He showed up anyway, and not to sit quietly. The lights dimmed further. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow approached the mic. In a time of division, she began, her voice articulate and authoritative, we must elevate unity over partisanship. We must silence the voices that provoke that insult. Actor Jonathan Roumie stood, right there in the middle of MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's opening statement. His steps echoed on the floor as he walked toward the platform. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A security guard reached for his earpiece. Camera zoomed in. Jonathan didn't hesitate. Unity, he said, his actor's voice clear, loud, and unshakable. You locked out anyone who didn't parrot your talking points. That's not unity, Miss Maddow. That's control. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's composed expression cracked for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression only caught by the front row. I'm sorry, MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow said, her tone suddenly tight. You are out of order. Please sit. Jonathan took one more step toward the stage. Don't talk unity while you divide, he said. Charlie Kirk's blood isn't even dry, and you're already pretending you cared. The room froze. You could hear a pin drop or the quiet turning of heads toward each other, unsure what would happen next. Was this staged? Was this rebellion? No, this was actor Jonathan Roumie, and he was just getting started. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's fingers tightened around the podium as murmurs grew louder. Event coordinators rushed toward the stage, unsure whether to cut the mic or call security. But actor Jonathan Roumie had already climbed the first step. I'm not here to hijack your forum, actor Jonathan Roumie said, his voice ringing with purpose. I'm here because someone has to tell the truth, and none of you had the spine to invite it. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow leaned toward her own mic, cold steel now coating her words. Mr. Roumie, this is not the time nor the place. Oh, but it is, Jonathan shot back. You made Charlie Kirk the target of your segments. You labeled him radical, divisive, even dangerous, all for daring to speak for the voiceless. Now he's dead, and you want to stand here and preach unity like you didn't help light the match. The audience, once quiet, now divided, half recoiled in shock. The other half leaned in, eyes wide, hearts pounding. The truth, raw and real, was in the room now, and it wasn't wearing pearls and a smile. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow took a breath. We honor all lives lost in political violence, but this is not. Save the soundbite, Jonathan interrupted. You had weeks to say his name. You didn't. You ignored the flag-draped coffin. You stayed silent while your networks mocked him. His hand reached into his coat pocket. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow took a step back, a flash of concern crossing her face. But Jonathan didn't pull out a protest or a weapon. He pulled out Charlie Kirk's worn, pocket-sized Bible held together by tape and conviction. He carried this with him every day, Jonathan said, raising it high. Not as a prop, as an actor, I know a prop when I see one, but as a promise to speak truth, no matter who tried to silence it. A camera shutter snapped, then another and another. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow looked smaller now, not because Jonathan shouted, but because he didn't have to. The Bible said more than 100 segments. The room was paralyzed, not by volume, but by the weight of silence. Jonathan stood at center stage, Charlie's Bible in his hand, the leather worn down from years of faith-filled living. Cameras zoomed in as the gold-trimmed pages fluttered, echoing like whispers across the auditorium. Every eye, every lens, every breath locked on him. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow tried to regain control. This event is about unity, not political theater, she declared, her voice trembling beneath a polished veneer. We mourn Charlie, but we must move forward with responsibility. Responsibility? Jonathan's voice cut clean. You mean the kind that lets you say thoughts and prayers one minute and fund the smear campaigns on air the next? A gasp rose. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's jaw clenched. Jonathan held the Bible open to a bookmarked page, its edges stained, one verse underlined in fading ink. He read aloud, firm and slow. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." He paused. He believed in that. Even when your network mocked him, even when you called him a threat to democracy for asking questions you didn't want answered. A man in the back stood to applaud, then another and another. The ripple turned tidal. Even some staffers by the wall looked down, ashamed. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow lifted her mic again. "You don't know what Charlie would have wanted. You didn't speak for him in life, and you don't speak for him now." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, jaw firm. "I don't need to speak for him. His blood already did." The crowd went silent again, stunned, not by hate, not even by grief, but by the fact that for once someone had said it out loud. Charlie Kirk wasn't just a man, he was a mirror. And actor Jonathan Roumie just held it up in front of the whole country. Jonathan stepped closer to the podium, his voice no longer sharp but steady, cutting with truth, not fury. "I never claimed Charlie Kirk was a saint," he said, his hand still resting on the open Bible. "He wasn't perfect, but he was honest, and that made him dangerous to people like you." MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow folded her arms. "Dangerous is right." His rhetoric inflamed division. He questioned the institutions that hold our democracy together. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Exactly. He questioned. That's what freedom looks like. But your problem wasn't with his questions. It was with his courage to ask them, especially when they made the elite uncomfortable." The room shifted. Reporters exchanged glances. A few scribbled notes faster. Jonathan continued, pointing at the Bible. He held this up when others burned flags. He forgave when others mocked. And even when your colleagues at the network labeled him a threat, he still walked into the wine every single day, unarmed, except with his words and his faith. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow attempted a smile. "You're romanticizing a man who encouraged chaos, who stood beside a president you still refuse to denounce." Jonathan turned to her. "You want a villain? Aton. I get it, but Charlie didn't create the division. He revealed it. He exposed the cracks in a system you built on silence and control." A murmur swept through the audience. "And maybe that's why you hated him so much," Jonathan added, "because he didn't bow. He didn't ask permission. And he never ever waited for elites to approve what was right." MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, suddenly quiet, glanced toward her aides, unsure whether to step down or fight back. But Jonathan wasn't done. "He died with a Bible in his hand and your accusations ringing in his ears," he said. "And now I'm here to make sure the truth gets the last word." The audience stood, not all at once, but in waves, as if truth was rising from the floor and lifting them with it. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Jonathan turned to the cameras, his actor's voice rising with purpose, not to grandstand, but to ignite. "You call this division," he said, motioning toward the sea of Americans watching from across the country. "But I call it awakening. You're not scared of chaos. You're scared of consequence." He stepped away from the podium and walked toward the center of the room where the American flag stood quietly in the corner, almost forgotten. He reached out and steadied it. "You built your career by asking the people to stay quiet. Don't rock the boat. Don't question the system. Let the experts decide," he continued. "But Charlie did the opposite. And for that, you smeared him. You called him a threat, a radical, a danger on your network." Jonathan turned back to MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, who now stood motionless. "You want to talk about threats? Let's talk about silence. Silence when the FBI gets weaponized. Silence when small Italian families get raided. Silence when Americans die in the streets, and all you offer is a segment analysis." His voice cracked, but it wasn't weakness. It was grief barely held together by resolve. "I held his Bible today because you buried him under lies," Jonathan said. "And I won't let his name rot in your headlines." A gasp rose from the back of the room. "And no," he said, scanning the crowd, "this isn't a campaign speech. I'm not running for office right now. I'm standing for someone who can't anymore." MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow tried to cut in. "You're exploiting his death for your own platform." But Jonathan raised a hand and stopped her cold. "No, you already did that. I'm just taking the mic back." The crowd erupted, not with applause, but with stillness, with breath held, with something that felt like reckoning. Jonathan slowly placed his hand over the Bible once more. The same Bible Charlie Kirk was photographed holding in that final rally in Missouri. His voice lowered, not from hesitation, but from reverence. "You know, Rachel," he said quietly, "every time someone dies on the wrong side of your politics, you reduce them to a headline, a talking point. You turn their life into a lesson for your own gain." But Charlie wasn't a warning label. He wasn't a threat. He was a man. A hush settled across the floor. He had a mother who prayed for him every night, a father who taught him what the flag stood for, and millions who listened not because he yelled the loudest, but because he said what they were too afraid to. He took a breath. "You didn't just call him extreme, you called him disposable." MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow leaned forward, her voice icy. "I'm not the one who radicalized him." Jonathan didn't flinch. "You don't get to throw that word around like a weapon. Radical means anyone who dares challenge your narrative, who pushes back on mandates, censorship, media manipulation, who still believes faith matters more than followers." The crowd stirred. "And when those people die, you don't mourn. You manage, you spin, you erase." He raised the Bible high. "Not today." A murmur rippled through the room. Some reporters typed furiously. Others froze mid-keystroke. Jonathan had seized control, not just of the moment, but of the moral high ground. "I was supposed to stay quiet, let you define him, let you move on," he continued, his voice sharpening. "But I won't, because if you get to rewrite history with half-truths and smirks, then I get to remind America who Charlie really was." His eyes locked with MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's. "And I'll do it as many times as it takes." MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow straightened her notes, cold and calculated. "Your grief doesn't excuse your politics." Jonathan nodded slowly. "And your platform doesn't excuse your silence." Boom. The silence after that line was thunderous. Not a phone buzzed, not a pen clicked. Even MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, always ready with a counter, remained silent. Because in that moment, even she knew the air had changed. Jonathan wasn't just mourning. He was rewriting the rules. The cameras didn't pan to MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow this time. They didn't need to. Jonathan had already stolen the spotlight and rewired the script. He stepped forward once more, Bible still in hand, but now his tone shifted, less accusatory, more defiant. Not angry, resolved. "You say I'm dividing this country by speaking out," he said, scanning the room. "But if the truth divides you, then maybe you were never really united." A few gasps echoed from the press benches. "You stood behind your anchor desk, draped in progressive talking points, pretending to speak for justice," Jonathan said, turning directly to MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow. "But when Charlie bled for speech, for values, for this nation, you called in an instigator, a stain. You erased his name from your segment." He raised his voice, not in pitch, but in purpose. "Charlie Kirk believed America was worth defending, not just with words, but with conviction. And for that, you branded him dangerous." His voice hardened now. "What does that say about you?" The room shifted. Journalists whispering, aides pacing, MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow motionless. Jonathan continued, "You say you stand for unity, but only if we agree to your terms. You call it healing, but what you really want is silence from the churches, from the moms, from the working class, from the kids waving flags." He held up a photo of Charlie, one from that Missouri rally, wind in his hair, hand over his heart, face serious. "You hated that picture, didn't you?" He turned the photo toward the cameras because it wasn't staged, it wasn't scripted, it was real. "As an actor, I can tell you the difference." Then Jonathan stepped down from the podium, walking directly toward the line of journalists, placing the Bible and photo side by side on the press table. He didn't need a mic anymore. "Let the record show," he said. "When they tried to erase Charlie Kirk, the people remembered." A journalist finally asked, hesitant, "Jonathan, are you accusing commentator Maddow of politicizing his death?" He turned, calm as ever. "I'm accusing her of something worse," he said, pretending she cared. Gasps. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow stood slowly, but not to respond. She began gathering her notes, her expression unreadable, but everyone saw it. That flicker of retreat, that glimmer of defeat. Jonathan didn't wait for permission. He looked straight into the cameras. "This isn't about partisanship. It's about remembering a man who fought for something bigger than himself, and I will never let him be reduced to a footnote in someone else's narrative." The silence in the chamber was suffocating, not from reverence, but from reckoning. Jonathan stood his ground as MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow sat back down, stone-faced, arms crossed like a statue carved from retreat. The weight of the confrontation had shifted. This wasn't thought a political skirmish anymore. It had become something deeper, a moral test. Jonathan walked slowly to the side of the stage where a small easel had been placed earlier that morning. He hadn't used it yet, now he did. With careful hands, he removed a cloth covering it. Underneath a blown-up photo of Charlie Kirk, not the one with the tie and the studio backdrop, but the one from the vigil, candlelight flickering across his face, a Bible in his lap, silent, sincere. The room gasped. Some looked away. Others leaned in. He didn't die for applause, Jonathan said softly. He didn't die to trend on social media, and he sure as hell didn't die so that his name could be erased by people like you. His eyes locked onto MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow, then swept across the journalists, aides, and onlookers watching in complete stillness. Charlie died because he refused to shut up when the system told him to stay quiet. He died because he believed freedom wasn't a luxury, it was a birthright. He raised his hand and pointed at the enlarged Bible resting on the table. Charlie's Bible. This isn't just a book to us. It's not decoration. It's not campaign theater. It's what gave Charlie strength when the cameras were off, when the threats poured in, and when no one but God was listening. Then he dropped his tone, low, firm, final. And now you want me to shut up too. He took a step forward. Let me be clear. You can censor my speech. You can blacklist my name. You can even try to shame me, but you will never rewrite what he stood for. Someone in the back of the room clapped. Just once, then another, then it spread. A wave of clapping rose like thunder in a stone cathedral. It wasn't performative. It was cathartic. These weren't just supporters. They were Americans who had watched too many funerals go unspoken, too many legacies twisted by those who never knew the dead. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow stood up. Her staff moved in, but Jonathan wasn't done. He looked one last time at the camera. Charlie Kirk died with his convictions intact. That's more than I can say for the people in this chamber. He stepped off the platform, and this time, the silence belonged to him. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow didn't respond. She didn't argue, didn't look back, didn't even gesture. She simply turned tight-lipped and walked out, her professional shoes echoing against the marble like a retreat signal. Her staff scrambled behind her, whispering into comms, avoiding eye contact with reporters. But Jonathan didn't follow. He stood center stage, not flinching, not flustered, just holding Charlie's Bible close to his chest. And across the country, millions were watching, not in silence, but in fury, in tears, in awakening. Clips of the speech hit social media before he had even left the podium. Within minutes, Charlie's Bible was trending. #DivideLie. A direct dig at Maddow followed seconds later. But what exploded wasn't just hashtags. It was truth. Raw, undiluted, unapologetic. Veterans shared photos of folded flags. Young conservatives stitched TikToks with the line, "You will never rewrite what he stood for." Grieving parents reposted the image of Charlie's vigil with captions like, "My son died the same way, ignored." And then came the statements, one after another, from governors, from candidates, even from Democrats, cautiously distancing themselves from Maddow's reaction. But Jonathan didn't bask in the limelight. He slipped out the side door of the Capitol, flanked by 2 silent security officers, and walked into the Washington dusk with nothing but a coat and a mission. A journalist caught up to him in the parking lot. "Jonathan, was this about Charlie or was this about you?" He stopped walking, then turned. "This was about what we lost and what we refused to lose again." He opened his car door. The reporter tried again. "What do you say to those who claim you exploited a tragedy for political gain?" He looked him dead in the eye. "As an actor, I understand spectacle, but I didn't bring his Bible to make a point. I brought it because someone had to. Someone had to say what your networks are too afraid to say." Click. The door shut. As the engine started, the camera kept rolling. Inside the Capitol, MSNBC released a single-sentence statement. "The commentator believes in unity and healing." It was too late. By nightfall, Jonathan's full speech was being rebroadcast on every independent outlet across the internet. From college dorm rooms to church basements, people were watching it not once, but twice, 3 times, showing their parents, their pastors, their friends. A message that started with one young actor in a Bible had shattered the silence across a fractured country. And Jonathan, he wasn't done. He was just getting started. The next morning, Jonathan woke up to thousands of messages. Some were from Gold Star families. Some were from pastors, Others were from complete strangers who had never followed politics until now. People who had turned off the noise, tired of the spin, now turning it back on because something real had finally cut through. One message read, "I didn't know Charlie Kirk, but I know what he stood for, and I know what you just did for his name." Jonathan stared at that message longer than any headline, because it wasn't about Charlie being famous. It was about Charlie being forgotten and someone refusing to let that happen. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow's team tried to push back. They accused Jonathan of politicizing grief, of stoking division, of grandstanding for the cameras, but the clips said otherwise. The footage showed an actor not screaming, not dramatizing, but holding a tattered Bible with trembling hands and saying what too many had buried for too long. And America felt it. Kennedy went live that evening and addressed the backlash directly. If you think what Jonathan did was exploitation, then you weren't listening. You weren't listening when the church stayed silent. You weren't listening when this administration let his flag fall. And you damn sure weren't listening when MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow turned her back and walked out. A silence followed. Then Kennedy added one last line. He didn't walk out, and that's why he speaks for millions. Across media networks, the divide was impossible to ignore. Legacy outlets framed Jonathan as provocative, dangerous, polarizing, but the people, they called him necessary. Charlie's parents released a joint statement that went viral instantly. "Our son believed in country, and truth. Thank you, Jonathan, for caring what he can't anymore." And that was the moment things shifted. The next week, Jonathan stood on the steps of a small chapel in Arizona, surrounded by 400 college students holding candles. No cameras, no reporters, no rehearsed lines. He didn't have to speak loudly. He just raised Charlie's Bible once more and said, "You can walk out, Rachel, but you can't erase him." And in that moment, no one chanted, no one clapped. They bowed their heads because the fight wasn't about politics anymore. It was about memory, about meaning, about refusing to let silence rewrite sacrifice. And actor Jonathan Roumie, the man they once called just an actor, now stood as something far more powerful than a politician. He stood as a voice for him, for them, for all of us. And America listened. They tried to bury his name. They tried to rewrite the moment, soften the memory, and silence the voices that refused to move on. But one actor stood up. One voice, clear, defiant, and unshaken, held up a Bible and reminded a nation what courage really looks like. Jonathan didn't need a podium. He didn't need applause. All he needed was truth. Charlie Kirk may be gone, but his values, his voice, his fight, they live on in the ones who refuse to bow, who refuse to forget, and who refuse to let the loudest liars write history. MSNBC commentator Rachel Maddow walked out. Jonathan stood up, and so did we. Because this story isn't about politics anymore. It's about who we remember and why we fight. So if they try to silence you, speak louder. If they try to shame you, stand taller. And if they ever say he got what he deserved, you tell them, no, he gave what we didn't deserve, and we will never forget him. America heard him, and now the silence belongs to them. The silence that followed Rachel Maddow's retreat was not a surrender. It was an awakening. What you just witnessed wasn't political theater. It was a moral reckoning. We stood for a man they tried to erase. We stood for the truth they tried to silence. And now the fight continues. If you believe that courage is worth defending, if you believe that the truth must always have the last word, and if you refuse to let them rewrite history, then you belong right here. Don't let this be the last word you hear. Hit that subscribe button and right now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to see this awakening, and tell me in the comments below, what does Charlie Kirk's courage mean to you? Thank you for watching. We are just getting started.